Okay, folks, so the wall is down. This is like a monumental, historical, political moment. But it's kind of the reverse, so it really doesn't work. Remember that you have your 10 minutes. You have the lovely Claire here timing. And Claire, remind us of the warnings that we give. He's on, yes? Can you hear me? Yeah. I do have, it's going to seem kind of awkward because I'm going to stand here with a microphone there, but for the cameras, I need to be on. So we give a 5-minute warning, and then a 1-minute warning, and then a stop. So Claire she's right there, the signs are in red, and then I'm over here, and when I stand up, it's hook time, okay? Afterwards, just to clarify what happens when you're done, as the next team is coming up, and I'll call the next team up, the team that has just presented will go over there by Laura. Laura's our official photographer today. Not only is she an epidemiologist, she's a photographer. She has lots of big word titles. And Laura's going to take your photo. And so we have a black tape on the floor. That's where your toes go. It's very professional. It's where your toes go, and Laura will take a shot. You will get these pictures. And Agnes will be handing you your certificates just before you get your picture done, so that you've got this lovely photo. Please get it in your newsletter, send it to your mother, all of those things. Put it on your Facebook page. I expect to see them. All good. So I think that takes us through the logistics. If there's anything I've forgotten, I'll remind you as we go. We do have to really sync. We have to sync with the other room, obviously, so we have a way of being able to make sure we're on time with each other. We have to sync for the cameras as well, because some of you have people who are signing in at particular times for particular reasons, and we don't want to make your mother angry that she had to wait to see you on camera, so we'll make sure we stay on time. But before we start, I just want to, again, thank our panelists and ask them to introduce themselves. So Carissa, do you want to go first for us? Tell the group what you'd like them to know about you.
Executive Director of the Rehab Care Alliance, so I'm sure I've spoken with many of you before and presented here. I'm really looking forward to hearing about the presentation, so thanks for the invitation.
Excellent.
Oh, and I should have put my
That's okay. It's a dry run for you. That's okay.
This is my dry run with the microphone.
It's a dry run. It's all good.
There you go. So I'm Carolyn Goss from St. Joe's. Have been involved in bundled funding and bundled care models for a number of years, but really excited to hear about the team's progress and learnings today. So it's a great opportunity for me.
Excellent. Thank you, and thanks for coming. So as Joe said, they're curious, right? They know a little bit about your projects. They know a lot about bundled funding, but they're curious. And so their questions are not meant to be threatening. They're to help us all learn and to help them to learn a little bit more as well, because they have a true interest in what you've been able to do. And I also want to echo Lily's words. I don't know if you sort of caught the gist of what she said in the middle. This cohort was a big PDSA for the ministry, right? And so today we're really at the study phase of this PDSA called Cohort 14. So it's really fantastic for us to learn more about, and for others to learn more about what you've been able to achieve. And then obviously part of study is, and what are the next steps? And so thank you for being part of a very large provincial PDSA. We do appreciate that. But enough about that, because what we really want to hear is Ross Memorial Hospital. Where are you? Woo, 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 going first. Catherine, Michelle, and Jennifer, and there is your poster. These posters are also on campus if any of you wish to follow along on campus. The timer starts when your lips start to move.
Good morning, everyone. We're very excited to be here and share with you how our project has been progressing. So our project was called the Patient Satisfaction with Hip and Knee Physio, the Physio Clinic. So we chose this project because we felt when we looked at the bundled care model, all the other pieces we were pretty comfortable that they were progressing well. We had done a number of QI initiatives to make sure those areas were tight. What we did not have in our hospital was a physio clinic. So previously, patients were offered their physio in their home, one-on-one. So you can imagine when now we have to tell them, oh no, you're coming into the hospital. You don't get to stay in your nice warm home during the winter months. You're going to join us in the hospital. So we were a bit worried because people talk in a small community, and we wanted to make sure we made a great impression. So that was one of the key things that we needed to think about. So we wanted to think about how are we going to transition from the home physio to that in-hospital treatment. So our theory was we wanted to impress them. We wanted to have them to have a really positive impression about the care they were going to receive and the atmosphere. So we provided things such as wheelchairs right at the door for them, good signage, volunteers to direct them, water during their treatment, places for their coats, wayfinding cards, all those. That's just some example of some of the things to create that positive environment to welcome them to physio in a group setting. And I'll let my colleague Michelle take over.
I'm just going to remind you what our aim statement was. And I see the poster's a little bit hard to read, and it's a little bit hard for me to see that as well. But so our aim statement then is the Ross Memorial Hospital Outpatient Physio Clinic will achieve and maintain an 80% satisfaction rate among its elective hip and knee replacement patients by September 1st, 2018. So we started obviously correlating the data as soon as it started coming in with the clinic. So we developed our survey and started pulling all the data. And we actually surpassed what our 80% rate was so far. So it's great to see that we've actually achieved better than what we had thought we were aiming towards. So you can see in our one chart there, that's not that big, but there is one point that I did ghost, thanks to my friend Agnes here that came to help me. But I ghosted that point because that week we didn't have any surveys. So that's what that point represented there. But yeah, so happy to report that our satisfaction with everything that we've been trying is well above 80%. So in order to understand how our project came to be, obviously we used some of the diagrams that we talked about in class. So we used the fishbone and the driver diagram. So looking at, I'm sure you guys had some of the same challenges. So staffing, resources, budget, location. So there's a whole bunch of things, time, and people wanting to invest into our project. So there was a lot of things that we had to work through. And I think we've really, now that we're kind of nearing the end here, I mean, we're just starting a lot still at home, but we've come a long way from where we started. And I think really it boils down to having an amazing team and definitely dedicated physicians and physios and physio assistants. I just actually sent them an email the other day saying we couldn't have got to where we are without them and being so supportive, so we thank them for that. And that leads to the next point. We had everybody engaged. So we really had everybody help us and want to take place to provide better care for the patients. And one of the things too is we encouraged, and I think I talked about this before, is we encouraged questions and we tried to always drill down to anything that we overcame with problems. So we drilled down to what's the issue and let's fix it right away instead of leaving it. So I think that really helped with our success of the clinic. So based on the diagnostics, we changed the staffing model. Actually, as of Monday, we have our own location now. So we did change our staffing to a daytime clinic, because if you can remember previously, we reported I had a clinic in the evening. So now we have, as of Monday, we'll be moving to daytime hours. So we're going to be shifting the clinic over. And then we had to, my friend Jen here hired some physios and moving that model over. So we've actually worked through a lot of things, and that leads me into giving the microphone to Jen.
Sure. So as mentioned, we did receive excellent patient satisfaction scores, but not a surprise. The complaint was having to drive to the hospital, especially patients who have had previous surgery and had their physio at home. But many of the positive comments were the patients really enjoyed the interaction with the other individuals who had been going through the same thing as them. They really enjoyed the staff and the welcoming atmosphere. When we opened our clinic, we had about a week, I think it was April 1st. The next week we saw our first patient. Our biggest challenge was human resources and space. So we did a lot of begging. And we found a temporary home. So I think we've promised a few things, so hopefully they don't remember what we promised them back in April. So that was a large part of our problem. We'll continue to gather our patient satisfaction surveys, and once we're in our new clinic on Monday, we will continue to again, to collect our patient satisfaction, and we'll start with our collection of the proms and prems. Again, back to our biggest challenge, the human resources, finding space, and the competing priorities that we all have. And our advice to anyone else starting a QI project is to collect your data early, keep your team engaged, constant communication, and keep your patient in mind, and have fun. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. An extra round because they went first.
That's right.
So we'll look to our panelists first. What are you curious about?
Hi, it's Chris. I'll jump in. So what's the plan after graduation? Are you going to continue to collect satisfaction data, and how will that be used to help inform continuous quality improvement in the program?
Yeah, we're definitely going to.
For our folks at home.
Sorry, yeah, we're definitely going to continue with our data collection because we want to address the issues and concerns that any of the patients have. So there may be other tweaks that we have to make because, I mean, the project has really changed in so many different directions than we started, and we can't imagine that just because our program here has ended that that is going to change. So we're just going to go with the flow and see where the patients take us.
I'll just add one more thing. We do collect the data on a weekly basis.
They can't hear you at home.
We do collect the data on a weekly basis, so we're able to address real-time concerns and not leave them for months on end. So we look at it every single week. So if there's something that we're seeing already within that week that there is a theme, we address it right away.
There. So I think it's a great area of focus around that patient experience, especially when there's been previous experience with surgeries or expectations. I'm curious just around what the focus of the questionnaire was, without getting into detail, but what were you most wanting to understand from their experience? Because it's balancing that choice versus what's reasonable to expect.
Yeah, we really tried to dig down. Actually, I had to get some assistance from Agnes, is how do you get the questions to pull out that satisfaction, right? And are you asking the right questions? So we actually did revise our survey, and it is there, although it's not super big. The tool actually is there, but drilling down, how do you get your overall satisfaction? So we actually had a question straight out. Are you overly satisfied with the clinic? And then there was a narrative piece as well that they could write. But yeah, those are hard things to drill down to get the answers to.
From the group, what are you curious about? Yeah, absolutely, Brock. Oh, we just got to get you a microphone. The microphone, although the acoustics in here are fantastic, the microphones are important because otherwise anybody watching just sees this. Right? So sorry, we have to be a little pushy with that today.
All right. As a manager of a rehab department who in April will probably be starting, I'm interested in what your funding was and the funding model you had and your delivery model and whether it was individual physio or whether you had group with physio assistants and how you delivered.
So the funding model, of course, is the bundled care model. So we just made sure that we followed that model, and then we're going to be within our budget, certainly. And we have the one-on-one assessment. So each patient, when they post-op, they come to a clinic where they do a one-on-one with a physiotherapist. And then group sessions, one physiotherapist, one rehab assistant. And then we were seeing 8 patients in the clinic. We were going to go to a smaller space. So that's, we're going to readjust. And now we have a new team, so we want to let them kind of model the way of where they want to go, keeping in mind that we still have to meet all of our financial commitments with the bundled care model.
Thank you.
Do we have one other? Excellent.
Hi there. I just wondered, from your evening to your day clinic, did you have a lot of requests from your feedback from your patients that was what they wanted? I think you identified that way early in the process that would be preferable, but what was the feedback after running that evening clinic?
It was actually because a lot of the patients found they were tired around that time, so that was part of the feedback. The evening sessions, they still came, but that was their comments. They were tired. It was the end of the day.
And I think we have time for one more. Janet, yeah. Thanks.
Hi, I'm curious about how your model looked in outpatient physio, like how many times a week, how many weeks, that sort of thing.
So we have expanded it because I don't know if last time, maybe you recall me speaking that we didn't have enough space, actually. We had the great clinic, but we didn't have enough spots. So we have expanded for the spots. So previously we ran 3 days a week with evening sessions only from 3 till 7. And then we added in the one-on-one physio assessments as well. So now we have about 3 days a week plus the one-on-one assessment. So we have expanded time because it's our own dedicated space now.
Excellent. Thank you to this group again. Round of applause. And now, everybody watch what happens now. You go from here over to Laura. Everybody watch. This is your pattern. Here's your bundled photo model. And as that happens, we ask the next group to come up, Kingston Health Sciences. So we're looking for Thomas and Tyler and Kim and Jennifer to come up. And we'll let these folks get their photo. Just a reminder too about your poster. Although it's appearing on the screen here, we may ask actually for that to go off because I think it might be a bit distracting. The intent is not that you can read the poster. They are all on campus, so if anybody wants to see them. Are we good? Oh, yeah. Is that yours? Yes. If anybody does want to see them to follow along, if you have a device with you, you can, but they all are there on campus, so you can look at them later. And so don't let them distract you when you're the team up here. Okay, congratulations. So Kingston Health Sciences, Hip and Knee Bundled Care Project. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Hart, and we're from Kingston Health Sciences Center, which is Hotel Dieu Hospital.
Maybe a little closer. It
Yep.
sounds a little faint, maybe. Yeah. Oh, it might be because I'm still on. Just a minute. Try again.
Okay. I'm Tom Hart. I'm the Director for Patient Access, Flow, and Clinical Resources at Kingston Health Sciences Center, which is Hotel Dieu Hospital and Kingston General Hospital. Let's introduce the rest of our team here. This is Jennifer O'Neill.
I'm Jennifer O'Neill, and I'm Special Projects Lead.
I'm Tyler Hans. I'm Inpatient Manager.
I'm Kim Smith, the Professional Practice Leader for Physiotherapy and Occupational Therapy at the KGH site.
So our project was called Post-Discharge Emerge and Urgent Care Clinic Returns and Visits. And really what we're initially focusing on is just enhancing the experience of patients. That was our initial goal. And when we started, we really thought it was length of stay we were going to focus on and decreasing the length of stay. But really our data and our journey guided us in a different direction. So once we looked at the data and really took a good look at each joint and each site where the operation occurred, it was really evident that we were meeting the targets and the provincial benchmarks. So we went down our journey a little bit more. So our diagnostic tools we use are the fishbone, we use the driver diagram, and the impact effort grid.
Originally, our theory, I think Tom mentioned this, I'm sorry. We engage physicians, a nurse practitioner, charge nurses, direct care physiotherapists, patients, and a patient experience advisor on our team. There were managers, directors, and other partner organizations. In addition to the previous mentioned diagnostic tools, we also found that the use of a TRIZ exercise, gap analysis, templates, and process mapping was helpful in understanding more about the factors related to our problem. The data told us, I think Tom mentioned this, that length of stay was in alignment with the provincial target, yet more patients were returning back to the emergency room and our urgent care center, which is at our Hotel Dieu site. And they were mostly coming back within the first 30 days for various different reasons. We did theme some of the top reasons of why people were coming back as well. There were some non-orthopedic concerns that were coming back, so we excluded them from the data as well. We looked at different quarters, and some of the data really varied. So it could be like 3% return up to 41%. So it was very variable. So where am I here? Our data also showed us that we needed to collect data at least on a monthly basis in order to be able to see a change.
So when we started to really focus on the return visits for Emerge and urgent care, we really made the assumption based on what we were seeing that many of the visits were really not urgent reasons, and that those needs could actually be cared for in other situations or settings. So as a result, and based on the information that we found through our TRIZ exercise and some of our stakeholder engagement, we really focused on trying to identify or implement some strategies that would help to realign where patients might go for their care needs, and also try and address the reasons why they would need to seek care of any kind post-surgery. So we looked at developing a post-discharge decision tree so that people knew what to tell patients in terms of where they should actually go, and that we were consistent in that. We've been looking at implementing a nurse practitioner role in a rapid access clinic as another alternative location for patients to go. Enhancing our pre-surgical screening and acute inpatient patient and family education materials, especially regarding how they should manage their pain, care for their surgical site, and how to prevent infections post-operatively. Those were some of the main reasons that we were hearing why people might return post-surgery. We also wanted to enhance our post-discharge summary documents, incorporating a patient and family feedback expectation for the staff, so that we had clarity that we were giving consistent information, but they also understood what we were telling them. And as well, we needed to provide staff education around the new processes and what those expectations were. We have done PDSA cycles. Most of them have really focused around the development process of getting us ready to implement those particular change ideas.
So in terms of next steps, so we need to, because we really were in the PDSA phase, we're looking at how we can implement some of these change ideas, the sustainability plan, our evaluation plan, and adapt as we go. We are, as a core team, we aren't necessarily operationally responsible for some of these areas. So it's like, how do we transition to the areas that actually do the work? And so that for us was one of our biggest challenges leading into that conversation. We were Kingston Health Sciences Center is a new organization as of April 1st, 2017. And so with our two sites coming together, our patients touch both sites. And so how do we come together in that? So having changes in leadership, having two organizations come together as one, has really highlighted for us how interconnected this work is. So how do we bring all those pieces together? And where we are today, learning from ideas, that this is a long-term investment for us as an organization, that this has kind of given us the foundation around how to embed the work of continuous improvement in our process and our outcomes. So our advice to anyone who's embarking on this journey is to really, it's an opportunity that use the tools that are available to you. It does take an investment of time to access the data and understand the data. It's a lot of learning, and so having the right team to come together is really important. I think to feel that you're going to come out of this with a feeling of success. And so with our AIM statement, it really highlighted to us the importance of that broad engagement of physicians, direct care providers, the patient, but also I think the importance of our people that aren't at the bedside, decision support, our quality improvement specialists, and our community partners. That group is really, how do you ensure that they're part of your team? So thank you.
Excellent. Laura, are you proud? Two teams said data. Are you proud? Laura's very proud. Panelists, what are you curious about? Carissa?
I don't know if you're at the state yet, because I realize one of your next steps is to implement the change ideas, but patients returning to the urgent care center or ED is an issue of concern across patient populations. So what learning so far would you suggest for other programs within your hospital or within other hospitals that could take from this initiative?
It's interesting because we had patient experience advisor on our team, and we also followed patients through the process. So we start with them in pre-surgical screening, followed them through the operating room, and followed where they ended up after discharge. We did that with 2 patients. And they had really a lot of pushback for us and challenged us around, don't just move the problem somewhere else in your hospital. We want you to really look at why people are coming back to emerge and focus on those issues. So we really spent a lot of time understanding. We thought it would be a quick fix to move someone to a rapid access clinic, but with that feedback, we really started diving into, okay, well, what teaching are people getting? What are the issues that are coming back? How do we help prevent them coming back from emerge because we're preventing the issue? So that's really where we went. We thought, we'd be able to implement the rapid access clinic fairly quickly, but we changed our end state goal to make it a really longitudinal because we want to really set it up in terms of the education. We're looking at infection control practices in our OR and pre-surgical, so we really want to work on the factors that are impacting people return rather than just moving the problem.
Sounds like you're peeling the onion.
Definitely.
So again, a great area of focus, and I'm interested to know, and I think you hinted at this a bit, who you engage with from the community perspective to help build, because I think sometimes it's just knowing, all the different providers, whether it's home care, clinics, et cetera, what information is being provided and who you engage with to do that.
So with our bundled care model, we have a really formalized governance structure, which has helped support this project. So we have a regional steering committee, which is the executive from the acute care site, the continuing care site, and home care. And we also have a clinical group, which is all 3 as well, inpatient, outpatient, home care. And we have organization-specific clinical teams, so we have a acute clinical team. But it all reported up through those committees so that everyone was aware of what we were doing in the IDEAS program. They had opportunities to feedback, so our rehab partners would say, that's great, you're focusing on emerge, and this is what we see, and this is our input. So it was really, even though they weren't directly on our IDEAS team, they provided a lot of input and feedback, which was great.
What are you guys curious about? What do you want to know? They had an amalgamation just before they started this. Don't you want to know what that felt like? What do you want to hear about? So I'm curious about that. Well, I know you're getting the wording right for the extremely deep question you're going to ask, so keep working on that. But talk about that. I mean, you're 2 hospitals, 2 sites, 2 what are they called? Plants, thank you, came together. So talk about that. How did that impact you?
So Kingston General Hospital and Hotel du Hospital, we've always had a very close relationship because we're just across the park from each other, and we're the oldest hospital in Canada and the second oldest hospital in Canada. So our physician groups were crossing back and forth already. The integration was a great opportunity to look at how to optimize the patient's experience and look at which we're still obviously working through, but what services should be offered at which site, and how we can look at the patient journey across the continuum rather than each site specific. So it's created a lot of great opportunities for partnership and innovation where we wouldn't have had as separate organizations previously.
That's a lovely glass half full answer. Thank you. Yes, please. Here's your mic. Yep, excellent.
Was there any job loss then with the amalgamation in terms of the clinics are running it at one site versus the other, or is it just run?
So the concept of our integration was really around developing opportunities to partner rather than job loss. So there hasn't been job loss. We've had realignments and natural attrition, but no
That's
job
great.
loss.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yes, Jody.
I guess just kind of 2 questions just around sustainability and spread. So as you talked about, you're sort of looking at the grassroots and then sort of going to build this up. So what do you feel that you need with the 2 organizations in order to get sustainability? And then how do you see that spreading?
So what we started doing maybe a month or 2 ago was looking at what the existing structures were within our organization. So the Peri-Op Services Committee, the departmental meetings for surgeons, and starting to inject ourselves to say, this is what we're doing. And at some point, we want to hand this off to you because this will be your new way of being, your future life. So we're going to support you getting this up and running. And then how do we optimize those current structures and positions to say, this is your new way of business.
Excellent. Thank you, folks. Follow the pathway. And as they are getting their certificates, getting their official photograph, let's make this team win the award for acronyms. Let's call them the QHC IFM for TJA. Let's call them that. Ed, Heather, and Derek, or Dirk, sorry, not Derek, Dirk. ED, HL, and DD. There. That's you.
Okay. Do you want us to start?
You can go with, give them 1 minute.
Sure.
Paparazzi, you know what they're like.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Heather Leonard. I'm a nurse and I'm a practice specialist from Quinte Healthcare. And this is not Ed. This is Anka Gilmore. She's graciously decided to come and join us today because Ed couldn't be here. She's our manager of perioperative services. And
I did not get a sex change.
It was reassuring. And Dirk Dameron, who's our manager of rehab services. So we're here today to tell you about our journey. Our project was about achieving optimal patient outcomes through an outpatient physiotherapy clinic, which we did not have an existing one before we started. We wanted to focus on this because our current state data told us that 99% of our current elective hip and knees were going to home care services. So having that one-to-one home care would not be financially sustainable for us under the model of bundled care, which I think is common to everyone. And we've looked a lot to what Ross Memorial has been doing and to kind of get our vision of what we'd like to do. So congratulations to you guys on how successful it has been. Thank you. So we initially started with the idea that we didn't know if we were meeting our best practice guidelines for the initial visit following surgery for hips and knees. But we did find out that, yes, home care was meeting that and doing a great job. But we knew that it wouldn't be financially sustainable. So we started to think about, when we stood up our outpatient clinic, what would be benefits in terms, for the patients and for us. One of the things that we thought is that we could probably provide more visits for patients that actually might need it, the patients that don't progress as well, because we have a little bit more control over and hands-on assessment throughout that patient's rehab journey. So some patients do require less, they progress quickly, they do very well. Would that leave us some flexibility in providing extra care to patients that actually do need it and don't come along as well? So optimizing the outcome that way. Also, we felt that the patients would benefit from socializing with other peers that have gone through the same process. And from an organizational perspective, we were able to offer further services through our hospital and increase our physiotherapy department and services that we provide there. So we thought initially we weren't meeting guidelines, but we found out that we were mistaken with that. But we feel that as bundle holders, being responsible to report on PREMs and PROMs for patients, that this would give us a really good way to manage that. And that led us to our aim statement, which was that we initially said by September 30th, 50% of our hips and knees would be diverted from home care to the appropriate outpatient clinic setting. However, we've had to revise that a bit. We have not yet opened the clinic. It's due to open October 1st, so we haven't been able to realize that yet. But we also have revised our aim to say that by March 31st of 2019, we would expect to have 80% attending our outpatient clinic. And the reason that we don't expect all 99% to go to the outpatient is it's geographical. We have a very diverse, large geography, and it wouldn't be feasible to expect all patients to travel that distance in order to have weekly or regular physio. Okay, and I'm going to let Anka carry here from here.
So going through the process, we had to identify, we identified 4 change ideas. So we needed to understand what the barriers are for the patients when we are going to implement our outpatient clinic. So we start screening patients in the pre-op clinic. The other change idea was we had to educate. And so we started educating our patients in the central intake clinic. So when they're coming right for their first screening to determine if they are a candidate for hip or knee replacement, we have that conversation. Our advanced physio will have that conversation saying that we are doing changes in terms of the physio component and that they know that they will be coming to the hospital. We're also going to set the expectation that we have that attending physio is really, really important and what the process is going to be. So then we brought our physio back into our pre-op clinic. They have a dedicated bay where they are doing pre-op for hip and knee clinics, and they're doing the baseline assessment. And at that pre-op clinic visit, the appointment is already booked. So when the patient leaves, they know that what day to come back for physio after surgery. The other thing we are doing is we are familiarizing the patient with the location of our clinic so that when they come, they are really familiar and comfortable and know exactly what the process is. Dirk.
As Anka, we had four key results that we noticed during our ideas journey. Yep, sorry. As Anka mentioned, we reintroduced physiotherapy services into our pre-op clinic, so that includes physiotherapy and physiotherapy assistants. So they're responsible for assessing the patient, providing education, and getting the baseline outcome data, the prems and proms that we've talked about before. We've looked at, or we've developed a scheduling model within our EMR, which we use Meditech, to provide early identification of the patients, provide them with their follow-up appointment after surgery, and then we work collaboratively with Anka's department and my department for outpatient therapy to make that happen. Again, we've implemented that early prediction model that we talked about to try and let them know as early as possible to where they're going to be going and why they're going to be going there, the importance of it. And then what we've been working on really hard over the last month with a start date, as Heather mentioned, on Monday is when we actually start PDSAs for our group classes, is trying to determine the appropriate size for our groups and also how they're going to fit into the space with existing services. So we have a busy outpatient service right now with outpatient stroke and pulmonary rehab for COPD. And so we're fitting those in and also learning in those areas for likely future bundled care in those services is what we anticipate. So some of our next steps are looking at three key measures that we've identified throughout the process. So an outcome measure of number of days from date of discharge to the initial assessment in the outpatient clinic. Process measures of the percent of people we're able to pre-book through the preoperative phase, and balancing measures of number of no-shows relating back to the early identification and education of the patient prior to them having surgery. So one of the things that we're hoping that'll help with our outcome measures as we move along is we've built in screens that we think will help as they come to outpatient services and the therapists and clerks are documenting, that we'll be able to collect that data and try and limit the manual collection of data. So I'm sure we've all realized that that's one of the challenges of these processes, lots of manual data collection. So we're trying early, and again, learning a little bit from Ross and others of trying to get things done early electronically. And so what we're predicting going forward is that we're meeting the best practice guidelines for hips and knee. We're meeting our financial obligations, which, like all of us, that was a key component to this, and having minimal no-shows to our outpatient clinic.
All right, so I think we kind of covered all of that. Yeah, you can go ahead, Anka. We don't have much time.
So what is going to happen post-implementation is we're going to monitor the number of patients coming to our outpatient clinic and compare that with the number of total hips and knees that we're processing. We expect that we will have a high compliance, so we're aiming for no-shows and cancellations less than 5%. And then we need to answer the question, does pre-booking the appointments at an early time actually has a positive impact on the number of patients attending the outpatient clinic. So those are the things. And if we do see a decline, and if we, because we are monitoring the data, we will do a root cause analysis. So that's it.
I think we just wanted to close with some of our advice for others that might start the QA journey. I think we already touched on them. Getting clarity about your current state before you implement changes, because we kind of made an assumption up front that wasn't really where we ended up focusing, right? And I think a lot of groups went through that. And the other thing was figuring out what to measure and how to measure it, so that you're getting some accurate data on what you do want to measure. And our lessons learned include human resources matter. It's very important that your leadership style and your engagement with your team is happening all the time, that you have a good connection, that you're engaging all the relevant stakeholders. And also in regard to human resources, that's not always, you can't always expect to, that hiring process can take time. So give yourself some lead time. And that's it. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay.
Monday's a really big day for a lot of you. Eh? It's the second group. I'm surprised. Thank you for being here with Monday being such a big day. And thanks for that great example of all teach, all learn, right? Great to hear about two, and I'm sure it was broader than just those two, but great examples of how you learn from each other. It's the beauty of this kind of cohort, for sure. Go ahead, yes, Marissa.
Comment and a question. I can't tell you how exciting it is to hear that there are outpatient programs that are opening across the province, and someone in my position having seen the erosion of outpatient rehab over the years, so exciting. I love that you're including physiotherapy as part of the preoperative process and pre-booking that outpatient. Love it. So excellent. Question about, I know in some other LHINs that have made the transition from home and community care and sort of redirecting patients to the outpatient pathway, that a key component has been a stakeholder engagement, particularly with home and community care, but also with surgeons, so that the surgeon doesn't say to the patient, okay, after your surgery, you're going to go for home care in the home, because that just blows everything out of the water. So how did you manage the stakeholder engagement with surgeons and home and community care?
Well, that's a great question, and it is true. So we recognized early on that consistency in the message was going to be really important, and that this would represent a huge change for our patients from what they currently do. So I think Ross touched on it, but if you've already been to QHC and you've had a knee done, and you're getting your other knee done, it's going to be completely different. So we have Ed, who is one of our team members and not here today. He's also our advanced physio in the CIAC in the clinic, intake clinic, and he's worked with the surgeons that he works with to say, this is the messaging, this is what we're doing. They're on board, they support it. And so that might be another thing we could measure, though, going forward, is everyone getting this same consistent message? Are they actually implementing that in the office? But by the time they see Ed, even for an initial assessment, he's saying, this, if you do have surgery, this is the process. So I think we're doing a good job, but it may be something we need to continue to monitor to make sure that that's not a gap.
And then the other thing is our orthopedic surgeons are very involved in the QBP and now the bundled payment. They know what is at stake, and they know that we have to produce quality outcomes. So they're really actively involved, which is great.
Yeah, Carolyn, go ahead.
So maybe just a quick question. I'd echo everything that you said in terms of the feedback. And just a question around, and maybe this is a little bit early to be asking, but around whether you anticipate there will be any requests from patients to be accessing other clinics, and maybe it's in that 20% that are more geographically distributed that you're anticipating home care. Is there opportunity for those partnerships, or even for the 80% that you're anticipating coming to your clinic? Do you think you might get some requests to be attending other clinics, and whether that's something that's in the plan?
Yeah, I definitely think we're going to get those requests, and especially having a large geography. So I think, because we've really just started with the pre-op phase and the education in September, it's still pretty early, and we just have a PDSA of our group classes coming this week with a very small group. So we're aiming for 6 in a group, but we're starting with 2 and then 4 and then 6. So I think that's something we're all looking for and aware of, but we may not have the solution just yet.
What are you curious about, folks? Yes, Ross Memorial's curious. I thought you guys knew each other. What's going on?
All right, I think this is for Dirk, because I heard you mention that in your pre-op assessment, so just like we do see them, but it is our OT, and they're not doing the pre-op. Well, they're doing measures and stuff, but they're not getting into that one-on-one assessment. So are you still holding your one-on-one assessment day, or is that taking place in the pre-op clinic when they're coming before surgery?
So I'll try and answer, and maybe Anka can help. So no, so we've gone over the years from physio. So before this journey, physio seeing people in pre-op and OT seeing people in pre-op, and we've tried to use a video for pre-op. And so with this bundled funding and with our advanced practice physio in the intake clinic, we've been able to have some version of a physio or a physio assistant who do intake, outpatient ortho, and pre-op assessment, see the patient, do the baseline measurements, but that's not taking place of the one-on-one assessment in the ortho clinic. So it's the precursor to that, the education, the actual physically walking the patient around the corner to say this is where you're going, and then the one-on-one assessment is very likely with the same person, but after surgery.
Okay, so similar.
Does
So
that make
our OT is kind of doing that.
So our
in the
OT
pre-op.
at this point is not involved at this point for that.
So there's initially the assessment done in the intake clinic, and then when the patient is coming to pre-op, then there is the baseline assessment done pre-op, because typically they're about 2 weeks prior to surgery, so to see if there's a change in decline between the initial one and now the pre-op one. So that's done in the pre-op clinic, and then the assessment post-op is done one-on-one, right? Yeah.
Okay, so very similar to us then.
Excellent. Okay, and our efforts to stay on time follow the pathway. Excellent. Thank you very much. Just as you've noticed the screen flipping a bit, we're controlling here. It's not being controlled for us in the audio room today. So not to add another pressure to you, but for teams coming up, just try not to touch the arrow buttons on the keyboard. I'll come and move it back if it happens, but just I wanted to add another pressure to the teams coming up. So Lake Ridge Health, Amy, Josh, and Tim, let's see if you can not touch the arrows. Can we do that? New pressure.
Yeah.
All right, let's get you on the right one to start with.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to be a solo guy today, Lone Ranger, but it was planned, so they didn't dump me. So let's see how I do it. So I can't blame them. So when we started off this project, we called it as the HIP QBP, and as we all know, the QBP has been around for a while, and it's a tweak, and the bundled care has been added on. And the provincial benchmark was 10% or no less. 10% should be going. Let me see how I'm getting this. So no more than 10% should be going into inpatient rehab. So we knew from our data that our HIPs were higher than the benchmark, so that's why we focused on HIP. So what we did was when we came here for the first 3 days, we got together and we started working on our fishbone and using the 5 Ps, the providers, patients, policy, process, and place. We started filling out what we thought was could be the various reasons why we are having difficulty with our HIP patients. And then we engaged our frontline staff. So we took our fishbone to our nursing, allied health, PT, OT, rehab assistant, managers on the floor, including our sponsors, to see what could be the possible reason why we are not able to meet the benchmark. From that, we got together to work on the driver diagram and the primary, secondary, tertiary drivers. And what really pointed towards was the pre-op, and we focused on working on the pre-op side of things. So our change concepts, change ideas were really focused on what we need to do in the pre-op. So we started collecting some data, and we plotted them, and what we found is that our knees were 4% going into an inpatient hospital stay rehab, but our hips were 11%. And we were trying to see, our aim statement is to make sure that we can work on that 11% to go down, but still maintain the 4% with the knees. We didn't want to compromise on that one. So what we did, we engaged our DSU for the data. We went and visited our pre-op clinics to see what they are doing. And we linked up with our home and community care, the senior managers, got some information from them. So we gathered information in terms of our pre-op clinic. They fill out a sheet, 4 questions to kind of say whether they need rehab or not. And we found that although they are very good in filling those screens, nobody was actually taking that data or information to action on it. The other thing we found out was that those questions were not sensitive enough to decide if a patient should go inpatient rehab versus going to home and community or outpatient. So having done those chart reviews, and this is where we are at this point, we are working on tweaking those questions to make it a little bit more sensitive. We are looking at resources that can be pulled in at the pre-op stage to see what we could offer to our patients so that they can, if there's psychosocial issues, or if it's, what we found is that a lot of times it's psychosocial, a bigger geographic area. Lakeridge Health kind of now covers the whole Durham region. We amalgamated with Ajax not too long ago. So we have a big, wide area, and we find that depending on where they come from, they're not able to come to our clinic, or they need to have that hospital stay to optimize them before they can be discharged. So looking at resources for teaching them about maybe respite care, having a family with them, so we can avoid those inpatient stays that's happening. And let me see. So that's where we are in terms of our the study itself. So our next steps is to tweak the tool. We're gonna monitor the tool and then see what that tells us, and we'll go from there. Our biggest challenge was that we found that our data wasn't clean. Initially, we had a higher percentage, and then we had to, when we looked closer, they were not just elective joints. We had some fractures in the total joints, so we had to clean that up a little bit. Our challenge was also to run the QI project along with your day-to-day operations, and also the time commitment from our stakeholders and our team itself. And our advice would be, like, our team was great in terms of having skill set that each of them brought to the table. And obviously you can see that speaking is not my forte. We had somebody who did that, but there was a data person who was very strong in it, and it helped us to kind of get together and move forward. And the other thing was to have a very supportive sponsors and executive sponsor. They were very, they were able to meet with us. They were able to kind of guide us when we met barriers and challenges. And yeah, and it's, as someone said, have fun. It's one day at a time, and then we just go from there.
Excellent. And he did it all by himself. He gets an extra round of applause.
Oh,
too.
thank you.
And now ask the hardest questions you have. No, I'm just kidding. Let's go the opposite way. Carolyn, let's have you go first this time. Mix it up a bit.
Get this work. And I'll go easy on you. Did a great job presenting. So I'm curious around the, when we're shifting this, you talked about the tool and the assessment, and often it's the expectation not just of the patients, but even of the team, and that really sort of culture shift in a sense, or expectation. What has your team done to help engage, the surgeons and the clinical team on the unit to know that there's sort of a different sort of mindset or different pathway that these patients would be going through?
Yeah. So when we did our driver diagram, it kind of pointed towards the pre-op. We found that the engagement in the inpatient side of things was very strong. We had a very good team, very small team, and kind of consistent for the last long 5-10 years, been in the same unit. So we found the engagement between the surgeons, the clinical team, the decision to who needs to go to inpatient rehab was pretty solid. The weak link was our pre-op. So we did a shadowing to see how they're doing. What we found is that the 4 questions that determines, they were filling it consistently. So there was a practice that was happening. The gap was the practice did not go to the people who need to know, and whatever that picked up, the action item from that was not being looked into or actioned. So as we are tweaking, we are confident that the because the practice is already to complete it, that'll be completed. The challenges would be really who's going to screen and what is the resource that's going to action on those areas that has been found is where we are challenged and we are working. So that's where our team is working towards. We're looking at a model we amalgamated with Ajax, and they have a social work model or social work present in their pre-op. So we're trying to shadow them to see what they're doing to kind of absorb from that and maybe try to incorporate it in the Oshawa site. But our challenges is really in terms of getting somebody to screen, getting somebody to make those phone calls, make that conversation, because very specific around psychosocial because of the area. The complexity of the medical needs is not going to change. We find that that's not probably going to be an area that's going to make a change for us, but it's really the psychosocial, and if there's any home program that we can give them ahead that they may be able to work on before they come for the surgery itself.
Excellent. Carissa, yeah.
So thank you. Just more of an operational question. You've commented on the outcome measures and the process measures, and I'm wondering if you can comment on balancing measures around this project.
So our balancing measure is we want to make sure that our total knees are not going to be compromised if we are putting all our resources towards the hip. Initially, we had our balancing measure as the ability to make our first visit in the outpatient clinic for our joints, if that was being maintained, because we thought there'll be an influx of patients going from inpatient rehab to outpatient rehab. But we found that our outpatient rehab, we have 5 different sites, 5 different clinics, so we have enough room to manage them. So we did not find at any time the percentage of, or the wait time for a patient from the time of discharge post-op to the time they actually started their first treatment was not more than the wait time that is expected from Rehab Care Alliance. But it's really we didn't want to compromise our knees when we were working and focusing on the hips.
Excellent. What else are you curious about? Hard questions, remember? He's here by himself. He can make up the answer.
Yeah, that's true.
Nobody knows. Hard questions. Yes, thank you. Make Agnes get her steps in today.
Hi. I'm wondering if you know the 4 questions that you're using to screen the total hip patients.
That is a hard question.
That is a very hard question.
That's why you carry an iPad, see? See?
I hope it'll open up. So the one question was around mobility. The other question was around family and friends, if they had availability. Let me see if I can pull it up so I can actually read it for you.
Yes. I'm thinking an easy question.
Give me 1 second as it's opening up.
That's great, yeah. Just while that's opening up, just want to remind you that these posters are now, just as Josh is looking for this, they are now at the printers. So pretty soon they're going to be 44-inch by 44-inch vinyl, and you'll get to see them again at the alumni event. So off they went, and they look fantastic.
So the questions are, can you walk for a block without stopping? Are you free of heart conditions that limit your mobility? Do you have a family member or friend who can help you at home on discharge? And then are you able to get out independently to attend personal appointments and errands now? And there was a calculation system. Please don't ask me how I can find it out, but it was like if you answered yes for, I think you have to have at least a no for 1 and 2, and either the 3 or 4 is a no, then you would be flagged for inpatient rehab.
Wow. You can email Tim or Amy to ask how the calculation went.
Yes.
Are we okay? We got 1 minute. We got time for one more question. Yes, and ask, right? Yeah.
So it's more a comment about like the balancing measures. I am interested to know if the decrease actually in the inpatient rehab will increase the demand on home care services, right? Because like when they're leaving the hospital, maybe you will notice that it is increasing. So this is maybe something that you should be monitoring in the future.
Right. So we did engage our home and community care as a part of this project because the model that we had was, and probably across a lot of LHINs and across the province, if the patient is not homebound, we were not getting home care physiotherapist to go. So it is a possibility that we had an increased number of inpatient hospital stay because of that model, and the link in terms of having real-time communication as the discharge happens was limited. A lot of time, our home and community care was able to make the phone call after, so which then recurred. If a patient is on the fence, we tried to stay on safer side to say, okay, you go to inpatient rehab. So that's why we contacted them. We looked at the patients who got community care, so we looked at a chart review and saw what are the various reasons why they were offering and why they were declining. A lot of times it was around geography, or just patients wanting that service and advocating in a strong fashion that warranted the home and community care to give those services. So,
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. And Josh gets first in line for lunch. So next we have the folks from Markham Stouffville Hospital, Tracy, Crystal, and Winnie. Get a self-portrait.
Morning, everyone. So I'd like to introduce our team from Markham Stouffville Hospital. We have Tracy Scott, our Director of Surgery, and Winnie Liu, our Health Information Analyst, and myself, Crystal Wright. I'm the Practice Leader for Perioperative Services. So our project was called Supporting Home Care Referral Best Practice for Total Joint Arthroplasty. I think that we have a really great program at Markham Stouffville Hospital, but the reason why we decided to focus on this is because historically home care referrals were not based on specified guidelines or any type of criteria. They're really based on physician practice. So historically they did what they always wanted to do. They would automatically check the tick box, or it could be because a patient requested it. And what this led to was that patients were not getting consistent messaging. So they were told by the surgeon, yes, you're going to get home care, but then they weren't getting that message throughout the whole perioperative process, and when they're on the floor, they found out they didn't qualify. So this really wasn't leading to patient satisfaction. So this leads us to our aim statement, which was home care referrals for knee arthroplasty patients on the pathway will realize a 5% reduction by March 31st, 2019, and home care referrals for hip patients on the pathway will realize a 10% reduction by that same date.
So one of the diagnostic tools that we used at the beginning of this program was the driver diagram, in which we had mapped out our primary and secondary drivers and our change ideas and concepts. One of the very first change idea that we implemented was around physician education regarding the need for change on their referral practice, essentially, and outlining what their home care referral criteria should be. And a key enabler to having this discussion with the physicians or surgeons is the data that we share with them. Essentially, what we looked at is the referral patterns by month by physicians. On top of what the physician education, we also wanted to ensure that our patient education content is updated to align with the consistent messaging around appropriate home care referral. What we did find is that our staff are getting positive feedbacks from our patients that this consistent messaging is being carried through during their journey, and that's what they've been hearing from all the different healthcare providers. On top of that, there is a nurse navigator position. This role was recruited to help with care coordination, discharge planning, and to engage in weekly patient rounding with the different healthcare providers. So with all these changes that we've implemented, we've decided on a few process measures, one of which is looking at the number of weekly roundings done by this nurse navigator, and the second is to look at the wait times to first post-surgical wellness clinic. And based on the data that we have been monitoring so far, we are seeing a more consistent pattern in the wait times at the individual patient level, that they are getting more equitable access to this post-surgical wellness clinic to ensure that there is seamless care transition even after they leave the hospital. And from a balancing measure perspective, while we're implementing all these changes, we have been keeping track of things like readmission rates and return to ED. And one of our findings is that we are not noticing any significant changes in our readmission rate pattern in the past few months of referral practice changes. On the other hand, we are, from an outcome measure perspective, we did decide on two outcome measures, one that looks specifically at a percentage referral for our hip replacement patients, and the other would be looking at your knee replacement patients. We did realize that for four consecutive months, that there is a 5% reduction in our home care referral pattern.
So then the question becomes, how do you sustain something when you've already seen this type of change in your project timeline? And so really that's the $5,000 question for anybody. So really it's looking at the project as not a project with an end date. This is something that if you're going to sustain it, you have to continually evaluate. You have to continually make sure that your stakeholders are engaged and that your data is driving your decisions so that if there are any blips, you can automatically correct them because you're looking at it monthly. So we have set up a process where we have a bi-weekly working group for our bundled care project, and that's going to continue on, and that's everything from evaluation, are we going to change anything or modify anything moving forward, and then are we realizing continual success for our patients, or do we need to change course? We already have a few things in place that really help enable us to sustain this. We have a really great working relationship with all of our surgeons at Markham, and we have regularly scheduled status meetings with the orthopedic surgeons on a bi-monthly basis, and they get their own scorecard. So this data has been incorporated into their scorecard for themselves, and we share transparently. So they all see each other's scorecard as well as their own, and all really drive the outcomes for the program. We have a monthly program scorecard as well, and this is another indicator that we're keeping an eye on the program. Our nurse navigator, as was mentioned, is also doing all of the patient follow-ups and the person who's the touch point for these patients for 90 days after their discharge. So we have that touch point also to evaluate and continually make changes as required. Next steps for us, one of the things that we decided upon when we looked at our home care is actually to RFP for a home care provider that is outside of the Lynn homing community. So we're very close to signing a contract. We're negotiating terms right now, so that's one of our next steps. And included with that is a 24/7 telephone line for all of our hip and knee patients, regardless of whether they're home care stream or not, so that they have a contact back with us even outside of surgical clinic hours. There's obviously then going to be new flow mapping required with new partnerships and making sure that we're all on the same page. And then the weekly rounding will be an interdisciplinary rounding with all of our care partners, outpatient physio, home care, the hospital, our navigator, to roll through the roster of all of our patients in the system for 90 days, where they are, how we can enable their success, and if there's any challenges, how can we mitigate them as they come. With that, we talked a little bit about the need for really setting expectations with the patients, because there is some historical memory there for patients who've had previous hip or knee replacements. And so we're in a large transition right now of changing all of our information. Our hip and knee education classes, we decided they're led by the same people all the time, consistent messaging. We take that messaging and provide it to the patients. It's updating all of our educational materials, our website, it's translating to our top 3 languages, and so we're in that process right now. And then obviously the PROMS implementation, so we're sort of next on the list for that, so that's going to be coming very shortly. And then just in closing, talking about our learnings or advice to people who are starting a QI project. One of the biggest things that I would advise is figure out what data you already have, figure out what data you already collect, and see if it's something you can use. Because we're all very data rich. And so there's probably something there that will help you get started. The other piece to it is that, you have to engage all the stakeholders. So we've heard a little bit in some questions about physician engagement and how do you make changes there. You have to engage them. You have to figure out what the win is for all of your stakeholders that are going to be involved in order to actually be able to move a project forward. And then it sounds very, very simple, but don't be afraid to talk to your physicians, because they're just people, and they really do want to make an impact, and they really do want to make sure that their patients are having a positive outcome. And I think sometimes, for whatever reasons, there tends to be a hesitation to approach them to join you, and you really have to be open and approach them right at the beginning. And I already talked about the fact that it's never really done. So it's not a project, it's a journey, and the journey will continue. Thank you.
Excellent. Tracy, you called it the $5,000 question. I think it's the $8,600 or the $9,200, right? Yeah. And I would copyright what you said about sustainability if I were you. That is the most succinct summary of what it takes to sustain that I have ever heard. So Agnes, maybe we can get that, and we might want to use that. That was a very, very nice summary of sustainability. Thank you for that. Caroline, why don't you go first this time?
So I'm curious, I think this is the first one that we've heard yet that, and maybe it's a little bit of an unfair question because you're still working through the RFP and that negotiation, but what do you anticipate, or what are some of those early learnings around the risk gain sharing or that ability to work directly with a home care provider in this context?
That's a really good question. We don't currently have a high population, and obviously we're trying to reduce our population who's streaming to home care unnecessarily. However, I think transparency at the beginning, so make the ask for what your expectation is. So things like a 24-hour hotline, and not just for the patients going to home care, but let's open it to all the patients. So putting those kinds of things on the table. Having a clear understanding of everyone's best practice guidelines and how do we meet them, because we weren't intimately involved necessarily with home and community. So we had to do all of the reading and the research and the learning to understand what is best practice, and same thing for outpatient providers. In order for us to understand and be able to come to the table and have that dialogue with what is best practice and what's our vision for the patients. The other piece is to very clearly outline what the win is going to be. So as you talk risk gain sharing agreements, it's not always about money. So I think that's the thing I'll put out there. Everyone automatically thinks about the money and how are we going to divide it. It's not automatically about money. And so one of the things that we did was approach from the beginning with how do we increase access for all the patients. So if we create a margin, we can provide care for more patients that maybe we're not already funded for. And so it's those kinds of dialogues that you have to start early.
Nice. Carissa.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure if I missed this, but I'm just wondering if you have, given the alternate referral pathway, if you have patient experience as one of your balancing measures. And I'm also really interested, and I agree with your comment about not being afraid to talk to physicians because they're so important to the process, absolutely. And you mentioned sharing of surgeon-specific scorecard. That could be so intimidating. How did you navigate that conversation?
Believe it or not, it wasn't as difficult as you'd think. There's a healthy competition among most surgical people, not just the surgeons. We're a bit of a competitive group. And so healthy competition helps to drive outcomes. And so it's really approaching it in a non-threatening manner, that this is all shared learning, and it gives you opportunity to dialogue with your colleagues, because they could probably be doing things that you're not aware that they're doing, which changes their data.
Excellent. What else are you curious about? Yes. Marcella, right here. Sorry.
Congratulations on your project. It's your outline is really resonating with our group as well. It sounds like quite a similar journey. I'm just curious about the nurse navigator role. We have a sort of a discharge planner for all of our patients. Wondering if that role that you describe is specific for bundled care patients, because it sounds like a very essential role and really helpful to sort of bring the whole process together, particularly with the 90 days post-discharge follow-up.
Yeah, it's a good question. And we have patient flow coordinators, discharge planners, et cetera. And so what we did was we decided to divide out these patients, because as we're embarking on this journey with all these other care partners and the need to actually be involved 90 days post, we needed somebody to coordinate that care and make sure that the outcomes were what we were going to see from a patient's perspective, the same thing that we would see from a hospital. So it is a separate role. It's only for the bundled patients at this point, and it's an evolving role because it's fairly new with us, but it's the vision of preoperative touch point, a one-person touch throughout your whole journey, any questions, concerns, et cetera. Educational pieces to the program for learning preoperative, that person will deliver. Involvement in all of our leadership meetings and our biweekly meetings for bundled care, as well as then that weekly rounding and touch point person with all of the care providers external to us, and really driving the outcomes that we want to see as a hospital, even with our care provider partners. Yeah. And also includes discharge planning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Follow the path to photography. And now winning the award for coming from farthest away. So far away, he's in a different time zone, and I'm not kidding. Kenora is in a different time zone, right, Rock? I'm not making that up. So this is the patient-informed hip and knee pathway, Cindy Brock, and this is Carolyn dressed as Jason, not really. Jason joined the project halfway through, and so he's presenting with the team today. One more. We'll finish our little photography over there. Oh, yeah, let's actually use the other microphone, because that one might give us...
Actually, we're going to be doing a conversation, so
okay. Just try. It might give us some funny feedback, but let's see what happens. Let's PDSA this and see what happens. It may be fine. Go ahead.
All right, so is that working?
It doesn't sound like it's on.
There we go. Is that working? Yeah. All right, so first of all, many thanks to Alice for... I didn't used to need these. Okay, now I can... Project did it too. So first of all, thanks to Alice for her help and guidance through our project. So our first realization and our problem statement was that we really didn't know what we didn't know when it came to what matters to patients. So then we came up with our big dot aim, which was essentially to improve patient satisfaction so that by September 1st of 2019, 80% of the patients receiving hip and knee would have top box scores. So our project aim, therefore, became by this September 1st, 20% of the patients who have had a total hip or total knee in our LEN 14 would be consulted to provide the data regarding surgery pathway system improvement. So we did it. We received 226 completed patient satisfaction surveys. This was accomplished through multiple PDSA cycles on perfecting our survey. The patient demographics of those responding included 91% of the people responding were aged 50 to 80. The surgical site was 75% in our tertiary center, Thunder Bay, and the remaining 25% spread through 3 other small communities in the region, with Kenora being a 6-hour drive away. And hips were represented 40%, knees 60%.
So Alice suggested today that we tell you our story. So we're just going to go one better and share the stories of the 226 patients that provided us feedback on the 11 phases through the joint replacement pathway that are listed up there. So we will share with you a positive response as well as a negative response that represents a common theme amongst all the respondents. So the first referral, the first part of the phase was the referral from your family provider to the surgeon. So for that, we did receive 93% satisfied. The positive feedback was the referral was done immediately, as well as ordering the x-rays.
And the negative comment was, my GP did not take my issues with pain seriously for more than a year. Finally, an x-ray was done, and my hip was bone on bone by that time. So the take-home message, the primary care shortage and or lack of knowledge regarding joint program and access amongst our primary care providers needs to be addressed.
The second phase, the wait time for the surgical consult, you'll see that was one of our lower ones at 75% top box. The 2 in the bar graph there that that's representing the dissatisfaction. So the top two are the wait to consult as well as wait to surgery. So patients are all about how long it takes to wait, right? We all know that. So not surprisingly, those were the two highest dissatisfactions. So the positive, though, was when I heard the wait to see one surgeon was going to be quite long, I asked to see another, and the wait wasn't long at all.
The negative was apparently my file was misplaced or misfiled. I waited over a year after my initial consultation to see a surgeon. I phoned to ask how much longer I had to wait to see the surgeon, and that is when they figured out my file had been misplaced. So the take-home message, as George Bernard Shaw once said, the biggest problem with communication is the illusion it has occurred. So, communicate, 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 communicate.
The next phase, the satisfaction with consult with an advanced practice physiotherapist, resulted with 80% top box scores. The positive was the advanced physiotherapist was excellent.
The negative was, I'm not really sure what an advanced practice physio is. So the take-home message, the role and function of advanced practice physio needs to be better communicated to the patient.
The satisfaction with the orthopedic surgeon consult was 90% top box. He was very professional and very informative. He was patient with me and made me feel very confident.
The negative was knowing in more detail some of the possible milestone platforms through the surgery onward would have benefited me during my recuperation. So the take-home message, improving the informed consent so that the patient is aware of what to expect post-op would be very beneficial.
The satisfaction with the wait time to surgery, and here's where this was our highest dissatisfaction, where we only had 70% top box. The positive, though, I was on a wait list for longer than 6 months. We received a call back and asked if I would go to Fort Francis, and 2 weeks later it was done. The staff were excellent.
On the negative side, I had my surgery canceled 3 times. Note that this caused me increased demands for employment and scheduling appropriate childcare. So the take-home message, utilization of regional surgical partner sites is effective, it decreases wait times, and it allows better utilization of the overstressed tertiary centers to provide advanced care.
The satisfaction with the pre-op visit, including nurse, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and anesthesia, resulted with 93%. It was all very informative and answered any questions that I had.
The negative. First, someone said, it was via telehealth. This should be done in person. Someone else said, it was done by telehealth. This should be done, it should have been done by telehealth. Wait, I got that backwards.
I had to travel.
Right, I had to travel from Cohort to Thunder Bay for an appointment that only took 20 minutes to complete. This should have been done by telehealth. So the take-home message, first of all, you can never provide enough education and information. And the second being, you can't please everyone.
The satisfaction with the surgical experience on the day of surgery was 93% top box. I keep leaning on that. Positive was it was very well organized, efficient, and compassionate staff. The pre and post nursing care was exceptional. The ward nurses were great, and they were very helpful and attentive.
On the negative side, I had my surgery at 8 a.m. and I was not taken to a room until 8:45 at night. I was not impressed at all! Exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. I feel that if the hospital has scheduled surgeries, they should at least have beds accounting for these patients. The take-home message. We have very competent staff, but we have an incompetent system due to the lack of inpatient beds at the tertiary center. Again, this may benefit from better use of our regional sites.
The satisfaction with the hospital stay was 85% top box. I'll just say it was interesting in that there were very many comments about food and housekeeping in there that, are really important to people. But anyway, I'm not sure we can fix all of that. So the one positive, though, was I was impressed by the teamwork and immediate attention anytime I needed it.
On the negative side, I felt totally forgotten by the nurses. They were so busy, they couldn't listen to my concerns. So the take-home message, listen to your patient and educate your staff to listen to your patient. Should also mention Jason as our silent partner here. Carolyn couldn't make it, so Jason came in his stead, or in her stead.
Okay, then the satisfaction with the discharge home from hospital was 87% satisfied. My discharge went well and instructions were exact and helpful.
On the negative side, a few here. I was told an OT would come to my home to ensure my safety. I never received this visit. When I brought my prescription to the pharmacy, there were 3 pain meds prescribed. This was very dangerous. I only filled one of them. I was discharged without any painkillers. The pharmacy didn't have any prescription. I had to manage the weekend with only Tylenol. The take-home message: communication during transitions needs to be reviewed and perfected, especially for med reconciliation.
The satisfaction with post-op physiotherapy was 93% satisfied. My physiotherapists were professional, helpful, knowledgeable, and did an awesome job. I just wish I had them longer.
On the negative side, I was told to choose 2 options, which I did, either the hospital or St. Joe's Rehab. Then I found out 2 days later that neither one of them had any space for me. The take-home message: clearly communicate the options, the expectations, and the goals to your patients.
Then finally, the satisfaction with the follow-up visit with the surgeon, 81% top box. Now we do, with our rural area, we often use Ontario Telemedicine Network for those consults and follow-up. So 20%, that follow-up visit was done by OTN, and 80% were face-to-face. So the positive was, after I answered his questions, he patiently and thoroughly answered all of mine.
On the negative, I waited 2 hours in the fracture clinic for a 4-minute appointment. What a waste. The take-home message: make it meaningful. For better or worse, people actually expect to have full engagement with their surgeon.
So in summary, although 9 out of the 11 stages of the pathway, we did reach our top box scores at over 80%. But the stories that the patients all shared with us, that we've shared with you today, clearly indicate that there's still a long way that we all have to go in improving the patient experience. Really, our journey is just beginning, and now we know what we didn't know before, and the hard work begins with trying to address some of these concerns.
Excellent. So this team was in a unique position because their bundled funding model starts April 1 of next year. So they took the opportunity to be able to talk to patients to truly inform the design. So really interesting. And now Jason will answer all the hard questions. Carolyn, why don't you go first?
You have a lot of really rich data on the patient experience on different points, and now I think you've hinted at that the next step is really incorporating that. How do you plan on interpreting that information, maybe using patients in designing or looking at ways of improving the patient experience? Because it's not always, as you were indicating, sometimes they're really contrasting feedback on the same issue, and how do you identify how you can make it a better patient experience?
Well, one thing, as we went through all of the data, certainly in trying to come up with the points we were going to speak about, it was interesting, even the consult and I had to travel 4 hours for a 2-minute appointment, or this was crazy, I could have did it by OTN. And so even a simple thing is even just better dialogue with the patient, giving them that choice when they're booking that follow-up appointment. Do you want to travel all the way to Thunder Bay and see him face-to-face, or would you like us to set it up by OTN? With them clearly understanding, though, that if you do go to Thunder Bay, you may sit there for several hours. So I think maybe that's a simple thing. Maybe people aren't necessarily getting that kind of a choice, and that would be a simple one that could be easy to solve with admin support and nursing support and the discharge planners on the inpatient unit.
And our target was 80% of the 11 phases. There were only 2 that were below that. So that's kind of our starting phase will be the ones where we clearly need to improve, and particularly around wait times and communication. So that's going to be Jason's job.
Carissa.
My question was very similar to Carolyn's, but it's so interesting, and I love that you spent the time to get this baseline. So you'll have a really great foundation, and it's informed by patient voices, which is amazing. It sounds like the issues are there's quite a diversity of issues, and it's not only within one organization and the process, but you reached in and found issues even within primary care. So it sounds like a really system level discussion. Do you have a table at the LIN level where you can discuss that and sort of bring in stakeholders as needed and look at it from that perspective?
I don't know, Jason, is Carolyn represented at the LIN? Yes, Carolyn actually is. Carolyn Fanti, not here today, is represented at the LIN and sits with the bundled care group at the LIN level, correct?
And because our program is the hub and spoke model where our surgeons are all out of Thunder Bay Regional and then travel to the smaller rural sites, we have a orthopedic steering committee, and all the CEOs of our 4 hospitals sit on it. The LIN sits on it. The surgeons represented, and then all of us at the rural sites as managers. Brock's on it, I'm on it, and that meets monthly or bi-monthly. So it's a good forum to be updated on where we're going and where we're progressing, as well as trying to identify improvements along the way.
Like that would be a great table for spread, even
Yeah.
just sharing knowledge and awareness, and yeah.
What are folks curious about? Big geography. Oh. Oh, yes. Yeah.
There we go. Probably more of a comment than maybe a question, but I know you were talking about MedRec and that being one area of dissatisfaction, and our hospital is going through accreditation coming up shortly into the new year, and that's one big area of focus is med reconciliation for patients on transitions. And what you just said, Chris, about systems level, that's really where we need to go, because we look at it as a hospital, what are we doing? And we should get our processes right, but then if we really want to transform, the whole system and make it work properly, you do have to get that information out to the family physicians and the other care partners. So I wish you luck with that when you tackle that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question because there's a piece of this that I think might be of interest to those of you who want to do this kind of patient level data. Talk about the process where you developed the survey and the questions and how long that took.
Took a long time. So we actually started with one of the tools that we got, which was
emotional.
Emotional mapping, and we thought, well, this would be a really good way to do it. And then we found that it was actually not very effective, we weren't getting any really rich data back. Everybody was just kind of making arbitrary comments. There wasn't really, it didn't really dive deep. So then we thought, okay, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. So then we started developing a detailed survey using Qualtrics. We actually distributed it. We had 75 respondents, and then we looked at it and realized, despite the fact that we had done about 14 revisions on it, that our actual grading scale was the terms we used. I think we had somewhat, and anyway, it was confusing. So then it was like, darn. So then even though we had 75 respondents, we stopped. We went back to the drawing board. We had to revise it, and then poor Jason had to redistribute it to everybody, and in an attempt to try to get 10% response. So it was very intensive to go through that.
And I'll just say, Jason thank you for all his hard work. You made over 1,000 phone calls to patients to get their email address to see if they would agree to take the survey. So Jason spent lots and lots of time on the phone, but it was really good because we did get over 200. Our target was 20%, and we did get over that 200 mark. So thank you, Jason.
And no, Jason did not bring his resume. You can't approach him.
Anything else you're curious about? Really interesting opportunity before you've got to take the leap to be able to hear from patients. And, it's one thing to be able to gather that information later, but you guys had a chance to design. And so we'll ask you back next fall to tell us where it went. That's excellent.
And the plan is to repeat the survey in a year, and hopefully we'll be over 90% everywhere.
Excellent, excellent. We'll let you guys walk over for your photo. Nice round of applause. So as they get their photos done, this is our lunch break, but I'm listening very carefully for applause in the room next door to synchronize. I think we're about a minute apart right now, but I think we're really close. So for the teams this afternoon, same sort of process, right? Your poster will be presented up there, but don't let it distract you, and if it's really distracting you, don't look at the screen. Just tell us your speech. But really great stories, and this is what we were hoping for, was to be able to hear the real stuff, right? And in a collaborative, we have that opportunity to share those experiences, because many of you, although you may not have gone the places that these morning projects did, you might be going there. And so you get a chance to be informed about what it felt like for others. Saw lots of nods when people were talking about things that happened. Saw some of you scratching out lines in your speeches and adding in words, and that's cool. It's all teach, all learn. It's all okay. But realize, as Joe said this morning, and I think we commented on at the beginning, it doesn't end today. You don't stop doing hips and knees today. Some of you are doing more as of Monday. But it doesn't end with being able to reach out to each other when you're looking for, how did you do that? How did you do that survey? How did you get all those responses? Can Jason phone 1,000 of our patients? Don't be afraid to reach out like that, because this learning doesn't just stop right here in this room. So great morning. Come on, clap next door so I can say we can have lunch. I'll just go get lunch first. We're good. Yes. Excellent. So 12:45, and we're starting at 12:45. So to respect our folks who are our first after lunch, if we can all be right back. And please make sure you signed your, I think they're called releases, consents for photography, because we've already photographed you, so better sign it.